Ambassador Maya Chen couldn't help but smirk as she watched the Thraxian delegation shuffle nervously in their seats during the Galactic Council's emergency session. Their bioluminescent appendages were flickering with what she recognized as their species' equivalent of smugness, though right now, it looked more like a budget disco light show. "And you're absolutely certain this compound will be lethal to the humans?" High Counselor Vitrek asked, his crystalline form refracting light across the chamber. The lead Thraxian scientist, Dr. KZT, puffed up his translucent membranes. "Our research is conclusive. The neurotoxin we've synthesized is powerful enough to incapacitate even a Moravian battle beast. We've disguised it within what the humans call wine, their ceremonial fermented beverage." Maya took a long sip from her metal flask, letting the smooth bourbon warm her throat. She'd learned early in her diplomatic career that having a drink during these sessions helped her maintain her poker face. Right now, it was taking everything she had not to burst out laughing. "The distribution has already begun," Dr. KZT continued, projecting a hologram showing bottles of the poisoned wine being delivered to Earth's major cities. "Within hours, the humans will sample their gift, and their pitiful resistance against joining the collective will end." Maya raised her hand, trying to keep her voice steady. "Point of clarification, if I may." The council chamber turned to face her. She could feel 50 different species version of eyes boring into her. The Thraxian's bioluminescence flickered with annoyance. "Yes," Ambassador Chen Vitrek's crystalline voice chimed. "Just wondering what's the toxicity level of this compound, like on the galactic standard scale." Dr. KZT consulted his datapad. Level 47.3, enough to kill most sentient species within minutes. Maya nodded thoughtfully, then pulled out her phone. "Hey, quick question for Earth." She dialed up mission control. "Yeah, Dave? Those bottles the Thraxians sent over, what are people doing with them?" The council chamber's speakers crackled with Dave's response, "Oh man, that stuff's a hit. Some college kids in Boston are using it for beer pong. The Milwaukee Brewery Association is trying to reverse engineer it for their winter special. And there's a grandmother in Kentucky who says it reminds her of her daddy's homebrew, but weaker." Maya smiled sweetly at the now pale-looking Thraxian delegation. "Anyone here familiar with human alcohol tolerance?" The next few hours were pure entertainment. Maya pulled up video feeds from across Earth Irish pubs where the alien wine was being used as a mixer, Russian bars where it was considered a light afternoon refreshment, and a Japanese businessman drinking it like water during a karaoke session. But the toxicity levels, Dr. KZTC tammered, his bioluminescence now a sickly shade of green. "Oh honey," Maya said, pulling out a bottle of actual Kentucky moonshine from her diplomatic bag. "Let me tell you about a little thing called Friday night in a college town." What followed was a comprehensive presentation on humanity's long and intimate relationship with alcohol. Maya took them through ancient history, Mesopotamian beer recipes, Egyptian wine production, Chinese baijiu traditions. She showed them medieval monasteries where monks crafted spirits that could strip paint, Caribbean rum strong enough to preserve dead sailors, and modern molecular gastronomy bars where drinks came with warning labels and liability waivers. "You see," Maya explained to the increasingly horrified council, "humans have been purposefully consuming fermented beverages for over 10,000 years. We've literally evolved alongside alcohol. That deadly neurotoxin you slipped us, we call that pre-gaming." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species with enough facial mobility wore expressions of shock. Those without simply changed colors, released pheromones, or vibrated at frequencies indicating distress. In fact, Maya continued, enjoying herself immensely, "We've been watering down our drinks at diplomatic functions. We didn't want to overwhelm anyone. Remember last month's peace summit? The champagne we served was only 12% alcohol. We were trying to be polite." Vitrek's crystalline form clouded with concern. "You mean humans regularly consume substances more potent than this?" Maya pulled out her phone again. "Hey Dave, remember that moonshine still they found in the International Space Station? Yeah, patch through that footage." The hologram showed astronauts sharing a clear liquid that made several council members' atmospheric suits automatically engage emergency filtration. "That's just Tuesday in space," Maya shrugged. "You should see what we drink when we're celebrating." The Thraxian delegation huddled together, their bioluminescence now a terrified purple. Dr. KZT stepped forward, trembling. We wish to formally withdraw our opposition to Earth's independence. Wonderful, Maya beamed. Let's celebrate. I brought enough moonshine for everyone. Who's first? 3 hours later, the Galactic Council had passed 17 new regulations about chemical warfare testing. Earth had been granted full autonomous status, and Maya was the only one still conscious in the chamber. She sat back, feet up on her desk, sipping from her flask and sending a message back to Earth. Mission accomplished. Send more bourbon. I think we just invented intergalactic diplomacy via drinking contests. The ZX Thraxian ambassador, who'd passed out after half a shot, mumbled something about humans being terrifying. Maya just smiled and poured herself another drink. Sometimes, humanity's greatest defensive weapon wasn't their military might or technological advancement, it was simply their liver function. As she filed her report later that night, Maya couldn't help but add a personal note: next time someone tries to poison humanity, maybe check first if we're already drinking it for fun. The incident went down in galactic history as the great alcohol miscalculation these days. It's standard protocol to test any potential chemical weapon against human tolerance levels first. As for Maya, she was promoted to Chief Ambassador of Intergalactic Relations. Though most species just called her the human who drinks, she considered it a compliment. And somewhere in Boston, those college kids were still using the ZX Thraxian deadly neurotoxin for beer pong, complaining that it wasn't strong enough for proper gameplay. Just another day in humanity's ongoing mission to terrify the galaxy with their recreational habits. The Last Call bar in downtown Houston was having what the regulars would later describe as just another Friday night. Despite it being the evening the Xirillians had chosen for humanity's supposed downfall. The alien wine bottles, elegantly crafted with swirling bioluminescent patterns, had arrived that morning as part of a diplomatic goodwill package. Now they sat behind the bar, already half empty, while bartender Mike Rodriguez created what he dubbed the Space Cowboy Special. I'm telling you, Mike announced, mixing the glowing alien wine with tequila, triple sec, and a dash of habanero syrup. These aliens might actually understand Texas taste buds. This stuff's got a kick like a mule, but it goes down smoother than my grandma's sweet tea. He slid the fluorescent margarita across the bar to Sarah Jenkins, a regular who worked as a chemical engineer at NASA. Sarah took a long sip and raised her eyebrows appreciatively. Not bad, Mike. Though I've got to say, for something that's supposed to be their finest ceremonial wine, it's pretty tame. Reminds me of that moonshine my uncle makes in his garage, but without the part where you temporarily lose feeling in your tongue. At the other end of the bar, a group of offshore oil rig workers had turned the alien beverage into an impromptu drinking game. They discovered that if you mixed it with energy drinks, the liquid would pulse in rhythm with the bar's country music. Hey, why all? Watch this. Tommy Martinez, still in his work boots and coveralls, poured a shot of the Xirillian wine into a glass of Red Bull. The mixture began glowing in sync with George Strait's All My Exes Live in Texas playing on the jukebox. I'm calling it the Houston Light Show. The bar erupted in cheers as Tommy downed the concoction in one go. The Xirillian wine's bioluminescence briefly made his throat glow blue, earning him another round of applause and several drink orders from impressed patrons. Near the pool tables, a group of graduate students from Rice University had already started documenting the wine's properties on beer-stained napkins. Jessica Chen, working on her PhD in xenobiology, was particularly excited about its potential applications. The molecular structure must be fascinating, she slurred slightly, holding a glass up to the light. It's like they engineered it to interact with human neurotransmitters. But honestly, she took another sip. My coffee this morning hit harder. The night progressed, and the Xirillian wine found its way into increasingly creative combinations. The bar's resident mixologist, Amy Torres, had created a whole menu of alien-inspired cocktails: the Little Green Manhattan, the Close Encounter Cosmo, and her piece de resistance, the Roswell Crash, which involved setting the wine on fire, revealing that it burned with a mesmerizing purple flame. You know what would really make this stuff interesting, Mike mused, watching the latest batch of Roswell Crashes illuminate the bar in an otherworldly glow. Mix it with that Serbian plum brandy Dimitri brings in. Now that's what I call a neurotoxin. Outside the Last Call, the streets of Houston were alive with similar scenes. Food trucks had already started advertising alien wine pairings with their tacos. A late-night diner was serving intergalactic pancakes soaked in the luminescent liquid. Someone had even started a social media challenge involving the wine and increasingly spicy hot sauces. In a dark corner of the bar, an actual Xirillian observer sat unnoticed, their color-changing appendages flickering between shades of confusion and horror. They'd been sent to document the mass incapacitation of humans, but instead were watching a woman who introduced herself as just a Texas grandma use the deadly neurotoxin to chase down something called a ghost pepper wing challenge. The observer's report back to the Xirillian High Command was succinct. The humans appear to be enjoying it. One of them called it a decent starter drink and suggested it would go great in a punch bowl. I don't understand. They're using our most potent biotoxin as a mixer. A mixer. As midnight approached, Mike started calling last orders. The Xirillian wine bottles were nearly empty, used in everything from cocktails to cooking sauce for the bar's late-night wings. The only casualty of the evening had been a potted plant that accidentally got watered with a spilled Space Cowboy special. It was now glowing faintly and had grown 3 inches. "Same time next week?" Sarah asked, settling her tab. "I'm bringing my uncle's moonshine. Let's see how it plays with this alien stuff." Mike grinned, already imagining the possibilities. "Bring it on. Maybe we can finally make a drink strong enough to actually give a Texan pause." As the last call's patrons spilled out into the humid Houston night, not a single one showed any sign of succumbing to what was supposed to be a lethal neurotoxin. Instead, the most dangerous thing they faced was deciding which food truck to hit up for late-night tacos. This Xirillian observer, now thoroughly bewildered, ordered an Uber and a bottle of water, wondering how they were going to explain this to their superiors. The attack on Houston had failed spectacularly. The only thing the Xirillians had managed to do was accidentally create the city's newest cocktail trend and possibly inspire a series of extraterrestrial-themed food challenges. Just another Friday night in Texas, with a slightly more interstellar flavor than usual. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had devolved into what Zarah could only describe as an intergalactic panic attack. The Xirillian High Commander's translucent membrane was cycling through colors faster than a broken RGB keyboard, while their chief scientist appeared to be having some sort of existential crisis in the corner. "This is impossible," Dr. KZT stammered, frantically gesturing at the holographic displays surrounding them. "Our neurotoxin should have incapacitated them hours ago." Zarah took a leisurely sip from her metal flask, savoring the 12-year-old bourbon. "You know," she drawled, "if you wanted to get humans incapacitated, you really should have consulted me first. I know this great little distillery in Kentucky." Ambassador Mitchell, High Counselor Vitrek's crystalline form vibrated with agitation. "This is a serious matter. Please observe the footage." The central hologram expanded, showing multiple scenes from Earth. In Boston, MIT students had rigged up an elaborate beer pong tournament using the alien wine. They'd even programmed the bioluminescent liquid to flash different colors, depending on whether players made or missed their shots. Are they playing games with it?" The Arcturian representative's tentacles curled in horror. "Oh, that's nothing," Zarah chuckled, pulling out her phone. "Check out what they're doing in Wisconsin." The footage switched to a tavern in Milwaukee, where a grandmother in a Green Bay Packers sweater was using the alien wine to chase shots of something that made several council members' atmospheric suits engage emergency filtration protocols. "That's just Betty," Zarah explained. "She's been drinking her homemade schnapps since the 1960s. Says your wine reminds her of her first attempt at brewing, but without the kick." The Xirillian High Commander sank into their hover seat, but our most advanced biochemical analysis indicated. "Hold that thought," Zarah interrupted, tapping her phone again. "You've got to see what's happening in New Orleans." The hologram shifted to show the French Quarter, where street performers were now breathing fire, using the alien wine mixed with local moonshine. The flames came out in spectacular purple-blue spirals, drawing huge crowds and inspiring a new cocktail called the extraterrestrial flamethrower. Dr. KZT had begun stress molting, their outer membrane flaking off in distressed patches. The compound was designed to target neural pathways. It should be causing massive system failure. "Speaking of system failure," Zarah said cheerfully, "want to see what the college kids are mixing it with? There's this thing called 4 Loco." Before she could pull up that particularly terrifying footage, the Centaurian ambassador cut in. "What we don't understand, Ambassador Mitchell, is how your species has such resistance to what is, objectively, a lethal neurotoxin. Zarah leaned back in her chair, boots up on the council table. Ever heard of something called spring break? Or Russian standard vodka? Or my personal favorite, that thing Uncle Jim makes in his bathtub that stripped the paint off his truck? The council chamber fell silent as she pulled up a brief historical montage: ancient Egyptians brewing beer in clay pots, medieval monks perfecting distillation techniques, Prohibition-era speakeasies, modern craft breweries, and finally a college bar on dollar shot night. You see, she explained, gesturing with her flask, humans have been purposefully fermenting and consuming increasingly potent alcoholic beverages for over 10,000 years. We started with basic beer and wine, but that got boring, so we developed distillation, started adding various botanicals, fruits, and sometimes even snakes to the mix. Your neurotoxin? We call that a light aperitif. The security footage continued to stream in. In Tokyo, mixologists were creating artistic cocktails with the glowing wine. In Dublin, pub-goers were using it as a chaser. In Sydney, someone had already organized a competitive drinking league around it. But the toxicity levels, Dr. KZT whispered weakly. Oh honey, Zarah grinned, pulling out a mason jar filled with clear liquid. This is what we call moonshine, my great-grandmother's recipe. Would anyone like to try it? For scientific comparison, of course. The Xirillian delegation collectively took a step back. The High Commander's color had faded to a pale, sickly green. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach to Earth relations. Wonderful idea, Zarah beamed. Let's celebrate with a traditional Earth custom called shots. Anyone? No? More for me then. As she poured herself another drink, Zarah couldn't help but notice that several species had quietly updated their threat assessments of humanity. Not because of their weapons, technology, or military might, but because of their bar menus. Just wait till they discover what college students actually drink, she murmured to herself, watching the continuing footage of humans treating the galaxy's deadliest neurotoxin like a casual Friday night beverage. That'll really give them something to report about. Zarah stood before the Galactic Council's holographic display system, having convinced them that a proper scientific presentation was in order. She'd traded her diplomatic uniform for a professor's jacket, complete with elbow patches, and was wielding a laser pointer with theatrical flair. Now, esteemed colleagues, she began, trying to suppress her grin, let's discuss why your little neurotoxin ended up being about as deadly as a wine cooler. Computer, begin historical record 1. The chamber filled with a holographic recreation of ancient Egypt, circa 4000 BCE. A group of workers gathered around large clay pots, examining the bubbling contents with obvious pride. Here we see humanity's first documented brewing operations. Notice how they're already experimenting with fermentation strength. That gentleman there, she pointed to a scribe making notes on papyrus, is recording what might be the world's first drinking game rules. Dr. KZT raised a trembling appendage. But the enzymatic processes. Patience, dear colleague. Computer, medieval Europe, circa 1200 CE. The scene shifted to a monastery cellar. Monks in brown robes carefully tended to rows of barrels and copper stills. One was making careful notes while another sampled their latest creation, his face turning an impressive shade of red. Ah, the monasteries, where humanity first mastered distillation. Fun fact, these guys were technically trying to create medicines. The recreational benefits were just a delightful bonus. This particular batch, she highlighted the monk who was now hiccuping blessed Latin verses, would eventually evolve into what we call Everclear. Your neurotoxin's about half as potent, by the way. The Arcturian representative's tentacles curled in distress, but the molecular binding. Getting to that. Computer, Imperial Russia, 1721. The hologram showed a snow-covered village where burly Russians were gathering around a massive still. Steam rose in the frigid air as they tested their latest batch of vodka by using it to successfully strip paint from a wooden door. Now here's where humans really started pushing the envelope. See, regular vodka wasn't quite cutting it for those long Russian winters, so they kept increasing the proof until, well, let's just say it could be used as spacecraft fuel in a pinch. We actually did that once during an emergency space station resupply mission. The Xirillian High Commander had turned a fascinating shade of translucent green. The quantum resonance patterns of our toxin are adorable compared to this next bit. Computer, Kentucky, 1823. The scene changed to a rustic distillery where a master bourbon maker was carefully crafting his brew. The hologram highlighted the molecular structures forming in the aging barrels, showing complex compounds that made several alien scientists gasp. See that Zarah pointed excitedly. Humans didn't just drink alcohol, we turned it into an art form. We learned to manipulate molecular structures through aging, infusion, and sometimes just good old-fashioned trial and error, usually with Uncle Jim still out back. She pulled up a complex biochemical diagram. This is the human liver. Over 10 millennia of exposure to increasingly potent alcoholic beverages, it's evolved into what we lovingly call nature's bouncer, your neurotoxin. She superimposed the molecular structure of the Xirillian poison. Our livers process this stuff like it's a light beer. The hologram shifted through rapid scenes: ancient Chinese rice wine production, Mediterranean grape harvests, Caribbean rum distilleries, modern molecular gastronomy bars. Each vignette showed humans pushing the boundaries of what could be fermented, distilled, or combined. But surely, the Centaurian ambassador interjected, there must be a limit. Zarah's grin widened. Computer, show them the Hungarian Palinka incident of 1987. Several council members had to look away from the subsequent footage. 2 species evolved emergency filtration glands on the spot. And that's just what we do for fun, Zarah continued cheerfully. Would you like to see what humans drink when we're actually trying to prove something? Please, no more Dr. KZT whimpered. The point is. Zarah concluded, returning to her professional demeanor while casually pouring herself another bourbon. Humanity's relationship with alcohol isn't just cultural, it's evolutionary. We've spent thousands of years essentially training our bodies to process increasingly potent substances. Your neurotoxin? It's basically a craft cocktail ingredient at this point. She pulled up one final hologram, a current scene from a Tokyo bar where mixologists were using the Xirillian wine to create glowing cocktails that changed color based on their alcohol content. In fact, she added, I've just received word that 3 different Earth beverage companies are trying to license your formula. They think it'll make excellent mixer for something called a Long Island iced tea, though personally, I think that's overkill. That drink's already strong enough to strip chrome off a bumper. The council chamber sat in stunned silence as Zarah finished her presentation. Finally, the High Counselor spoke, their crystalline form vibrating with a mix of horror and fascination. Ambassador Mitchell, are you suggesting that humans have effectively weaponized their own recreational beverages to the point where actual weapons are ineffective? Weaponized, Zarah laughed, taking another sip of bourbon. Nah. We just like to have a good time. Though I should warn you, never challenge a polished grandmother to a drinking contest. That's not a fight you're going to win. As if to punctuate her point, the hologram showed a final scene. A quaint polished kitchen where an elderly woman was using the Xirillian wine to clean grease stains off her stove while complaining that it wasn't quite strong enough for her traditional family recipes. The formal apology ceremony from the Xirillian delegation was going splendidly. Right up until someone suggested they seal the peace accord with a traditional Earth custom, a toast. Zarah watched with barely concealed amusement as the ex-Xirillian ambassador, KZZ, eyed the small glass of clear liquid she'd placed before him. His bioluminescent appendages were flickering with what she'd learned to recognize as extreme apprehension. This is safe, he asked, membranes quivering. Oh, absolutely, Zarah assured him, her poker face perfected by years of diplomatic service. Just a little something my great-grandmother used to make. Family recipe. We call it mountain lightning. The gathered dignitaries from across the galaxy watched in fascination as KZT lifted the glass with a trembling appendage. Zarah had already consumed her portion without so much as a blink. To peace and understanding, KZT proclaimed diplomatically, then took what he clearly thought would be a modest sip. The effect was immediate. His bioluminescence went through every color of the visible spectrum, then a few that weren't supposed to be possible. His translator made a sound like a dial-up modem having an existential crisis, and his auxiliary breathing membranes inflated to twice their normal size. That's he managed to squeak before his universal translator gave up entirely and started playing what sounded suspiciously like polka music. KZT made it exactly 3 steps toward the door before gracefully collapsing into what the medical team would later describe as the most peaceful coma they'd ever seen. His last coherent words, according to his translator, were "Humans are terrifying." The incident led to several immediate changes in galactic law. First, the Council unanimously passed what became known as the Human Tolerance Protocol, requiring all chemical and biological weapons to be tested against average human resistance levels before being classified as threats. This effectively rendered about 73% of the galaxy's existing arsenal about as dangerous to humans as fizzy water. Second, humanity gained an entirely unexpected reputation. Not as warriors, diplomats, or technological innovators, but as the species you absolutely, positively did not challenge to a drinking contest. 3 different species added warnings about this to their first contact protocols. Zarah mused to High Counselor Vitrek as they watched medical staff cart away the still glowing KZT. He actually handled that better than most. Last time I shared great-grandma's recipe, the Centaurian ambassador tried to declare war on gravity. The council chambers had been bustling with activity as various species updated their threat assessments of humanity. The modifications were fascinating, warning capable of consuming substances that could dissolve standard battleship hull plating. And caution, recreational beverages may be classified as weapons of mass destruction in some sectors. Ambassador Mitchell Vitrek's crystalline form chimed thoughtfully, "Your species continues to surprise us. We thought we understood human resilience when we saw your adaptability to different environments. But this..." "Oh, this is nothing," Zarah grinned, pulling out another mason jar of clear liquid. "Wait until you hear about this thing we invented called competitive eating contests." The chamber quickly emptied of about half its occupants. In the months that followed, humanity's position in the galactic community shifted in unexpected ways. The Xirillians, having recovered from their failed poisoning attempt, and KZT having finally regained consciousness, though he now glowed faintly in the dark, became surprisingly close allies. They'd developed a peculiar respect for any species that could turn their deadliest toxins into party drinks. Earth's various alcoholic beverages became hot commodities in the galactic market, though each bottle now came with warning labels in 47 languages. The labels ranged from "may cause spontaneous philosophy in silicon-based life forms" to "do not operate quantum drives" or "attempt temporal physics after consumption." As for Zarah, she kept a bottle of her family's moonshine prominently displayed in her office at the Galactic Embassy. It served as both a conversation piece and a surprisingly effective diplomatic tool. Nothing ended interstellar conflicts quite like the threat of having to drink it. The final amendment to the peace treaty included a peculiar clause, insisted upon by the Xirillians: under no circumstances shall humanity be provoked into weaponizing their recreational substances. Below that, in smaller text, they're scary enough as it is. Zarah celebrated the successful treaty, signing the traditional human way by heading to her favorite bar on Earth, where the bartender was now serving something called a Xirillian surrender, made with their original deadly wine and a splash of good old Kentucky bourbon. It glowed in the dark, played havoc with gravity, and came with its own liability waiver. Just another Friday night for humanity, though now with a slightly more intergalactic flair.